beautiful Monday afternoon. So, Madam Secretary, please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today is Monday, June 20th, 2016, and a quorum is present. The first item on the agenda are the proposed rules for the Waterfront Revitalization Program Consistency Review, and our presenter is Michael Morella, Director of Waterfront and Open Space Planning for the department.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Happy summer. This morning I'll be presenting to you a proposed rule change to the rules of the City of New York, Title 62, Chapter 4, pursuant to the City Administrative Procedures Act, related to the Commission and the Department's review of projects brought before the Waterfront Revitalization Program. As the Commission likely recalls, the Commission was named as the City Planning Commission was named as the City Coastal Commission, as stated in the first WR Waterfront Revitalization Program starting in 1982 in the City of New York. And therefore, the rules that we're proposing, which are the administrative rules by which we go about reviewing these projects, is part of your purview. So let me begin by talking a bit about what the Waterfront Revitalization Program is, to give you a reminder. The Waterfront Revitalization Program is a planning tool that helps shape and improve coastal projects by requiring that they reflect and are consistent with the city's long-term policies for waterfront planning, preservation, and development. All projects that are within the city's coastal zone, which is a mapped area contained within the Waterfront Revitalization Program document itself, and which require a federal, state, or city discretionary action, are subject to WRP consistency review. The City Planning Commission, in its capacity as the Coastal Commission, and the Department of City Planning are responsible for administering the WRP, the Waterfront Revitalization Program. So discretionary city, state, and federal actions that are subject to WRP include, but are not limited to the following: ULURP applications, which you commonly see, rezonings, city map changes, disposition of city-owned land, etc. City capital projects, state and federal environmental permits for in-water construction and wetlands, and the construction of piers, docks, bulkheads, riprap, etc., as well as the use of federal funds. It's important to note that as of right construction that only requires a building permit does not require WRP review. This table lays out who is responsible for conducting the review and for what types of projects. And so starting on the top left, the local actions, so actions that are requiring approval of the City Planning Commission, as say ULURP projects, the City Planning Commission, acting as the City Coastal Commission, makes the WRP determination as is stated in your City Planning Commission reports. Actions not requiring approval by the City Planning Commission but are local actions that are subject to environmental review, it's the lead agency that makes that consistency determination and is coordinated with my division in the department. State actions that are subject to WRP, that is to say, state highway construction or New York State Department of Environmental Conservation permits. It's the state agency that conducts the review, and notification is given to New York State Department of State, again, with coordination with the Department of City Planning. And then federal actions, direct actions, permits granted by federal agencies or funding, those are reviewed for consistency by the New York State Department of State, concurring or objecting to the applicant's determination. And once again, this is sent to the Department of City Planning for an advisory review with the Department of State. And so I lay this out, and it's admittedly a bit confusing as to who has to do what and when. By way of background, there are 10 policy areas within the Waterfront Revitalization Program. I want to clarify that the proposed changes that we are proposing today are not changing the policies, it's just changing the procedures by which the review occurs, and I'll spell that out in just a little bit. But the 10 policy areas of the WRP, residential and commercial redevelopment, maritime and industrial development, waterway usage, ecological resource protection, water quality, flooding and erosion, hazardous material, public access, visual quality, and finally historic, archaeological, and cultural resources. And the reason why I read off all 10 of those is to show you the breadth and scope of the Waterfront Revitalization Program. As many of the commissioners remember, and many of the commissioners were sitting in your seats when we took a set of revisions through of the policies through the process for revisions just a few years ago. In March of 2012, the City Planning Commission referred out the set of new policies for WRP review as pursuant to Section 197A of the City Charter. In September of 2013, the City Planning Commission approved the WRP. October, just the following month, the City Council approved the WRP. And then in February 2016, New York State Department of State approved the WRP. And then just earlier this month, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration approved the WRP, which is the final step in the federal approval of the WRP. And the reason why this is necessary, this multi-step process for state and federal approval, is because of the influence that the local program has on state and federal projects, that we do have this important advisory role in the review of both state and federal projects. So let me talk a bit about now the current rules and the proposed rule. This is the meat of it. So the City Coastal Commission rules state, and the WRP rather, designates the City Planning Commission as the Coastal Commission and administers the Waterfront Revitalization Program with the Department of City Planning. The rules of City of New York, Title 62, Chapter 4, set forth the City Coastal Commission and the department's procedures for reviewing of local, state, and federal actions with respect to consistency of such actions with the WRP policies before a final determination on the action can be made. And so there are 4 elements of the proposed rule change. The first is to make the rule consistent with state procedures in terms of which local discretionary actions it applies to. And I should state that I'll go through all of these in further detail. The second item is to clarify and streamline the thresholds for when the department will refer state and federal actions to the City Coastal Commission for review. The third is to reestablish and clarify the role of the department and the City Coastal Commission in local projects that are subject to seeker but are not otherwise subject to the commission approval. And then the fourth is to remove outdated references and other provisions regarding internal or interagency procedures which do not need to be embedded in the rule itself. So let me start with number 1, making the rules consistent with state procedures in terms of which local discretionary actions it applies to. The proposed rules clarify that only discretionary actions classified as type 1 or unlisted actions under environmental review are subject to WRP review. This is to make our local practice consistent with how the state reviews projects, which is to say that type 2 actions, which under seeker are those types of actions that may be discretionary but are otherwise considered not to have the potential for an adverse impact on the environment and therefore not have an impact on the coastal zone. And so this will result in fewer projects being subject to WRP review, as this will make it clearly stated that non-discretionary type 2 actions are not subject to WRP review. We will also clarify which state and federal actions the department will refer to the City Coastal Commission for review. The current rules require that the department refer to state and federal actions to the City Coastal Commission that exceed 1 or more of the following thresholds: actions that are requiring the balancing of several different policies, actions that are significantly inconsistent with waterfront policies, actions that require a federal or state environmental impact statement, or actions that require policy interpretation. These 4 thresholds are quite cumbersome, and therefore we'd like it to be streamlined into 1 single threshold. And under the proposed rule, the department would refer state and federal actions to the Coastal Commission for review when the department finds that actions may substantially hinder 1 or more policies of the WRP. This threshold would be applied to local projects that do not otherwise come before the Commission for approval as well. But the term of substantial hindrance is a term of art within the coastal consistency world, and it is now used at the state and federal level as well. And so, using that term to describe the threshold, it would be more consistent with how the state and the federal government looks at these projects as well. Let me talk a little bit more about the findings of substantial hindrance. The WRP provides that if an action will substantially hinder the achievement of 1 or more of the policies or purposes of the WRP, the City Coastal Commission must make the following 4 findings, which, if met, will result in a determination of consistency. So even if you were to find that a project were to have a substantial hindrance, it does not mean that the project is necessarily stopped at that point. You still have the alternative of making these 4 findings. So no reasonable alternative exists which would permit the action to be taken in a manner which would not substantially hinder the achievement of such policy. The action will be taken to minimize all adverse effects on such policies to the maximum extent practicable. The action will advance one or more of the other coastal policies, and the action will result in overriding local public benefit. For local actions, the City Coastal Commission must concur with the seeker lead agency's findings. And for state and federal actions, the Coastal Commission shall provide an advisory determination to the New York State Department of State as to whether these 4 findings are met. The third set of proposed changes, reestablishing and clarifying the role of the department and the City Coastal Commission in local projects that are subject to seeker but are not subject to Coastal Commission approval. This is to clarify that all local actions that require WRP consistency determination must be provided to the department for review, and that the department or the City Coastal Commission must concur with the seeker lead agency's findings for the project to advance. And this, in many ways, is a clarification of the intent, the original intent from 1981, in that the current rules were written when the department was co-lead agency with DEP for all seeker actions, regardless of whether or not they had ULURP actions attached to them. And at that time, the commission and the department reviewed all actions for consistency with the WRP, including those actions that did not require ULURP or other CPC involvement. However, after the seeker rules were changed in 1991, establishing the seeker lead agency framework, the WRP rules were not changed, leading to some confusion. And so by practice, many, if not most agencies, already submit their projects to the WRP for consistency review. But the proposed rules would change, the proposed rule change codifies that practice and reasserts the department's role in that review. And then finally, removing outdated references and procedures. One of the important changes is we would remove the references to the Board of Estimate. We would also include all DCP specific.
Say it ain't so.
Yes. If that's, we could open that up for debate. We could also include all DCP-specific administration items in separate standard operating procedure memos, which may be subject to change, such as the exact language used in the CPC reports, or which is governed by other laws and regulations, that is to say the review periods for state and federal consistency reviews, which again don't need to necessarily be in our own rules. And so these are some fairly minor cleanup actions, although if the chair wants to debate the Board of Estimate reference, we can discuss that. So now let me talk about the capital rule change process, because this is we're really at the start of the capital rule change process. So there's a multi-step process for changing the rules of the City of New York as outlined in the City Administrative Procedures Act. Step one is that the agency drafts the proposed rule and obtains Mayor's Office and Law Department certification, and we have already received that permission. The next step is that the agency publishes the proposed rules. But as these rules pertain to the review of the City Planning Commission, it's necessary to obtain your assent to the publishing of the rules, which is why we are here today. The next step after that, step 3, is that the agency holds the public hearing. Step 4 is the agency adopts the final rule, which may include revisions to the proposed rule. Step 5 is the agency publishes the final rule after final certification from the Mayor's Office and the Law Department. And then finally, step 6 is the final rule is effective 30 days after the publication. I should mention that we anticipate holding the public hearing in late July, July 27th is what we have anticipated as our calendar. But the step right now is to receive permission from you to start the process by the publishing of the rules. And with that, we ask for your assent for the publishing of the rules, but also happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Michael. Questions for Michael? You wouldn't think it would take us 4.5 years to get to this point, but I guess it has, so.
26 years to get rid of the Board of Estimate.
And we're still not there yet. Ms. Delus.
Michael,
remind me the difference between a type 1 and a type 2 action?
Oh, yes, thank you. So under seeker rules, under the rules of seeker, there are 3 distinct categories. There are type 1 actions, which are categorically require a full environmental impact statement. Type 2 actions are those, and I turn to council to make sure, and actually, could I? Presumed, excuse me, presumed to be, to require a full environmental impact statement. Type 2 actions are categorically presumed to not require additional environmental review. Actually, I'll let Bob answer this. This is why Bob is irreplaceable.
Mr. DeBruskin.
So type 2 actions do not require environmental review. Type 1 actions are presumed to have impacts and are presumed to require an EIS, but do not require one. And unlisted actions are everything in between.
Mr. Cirillo.
So just to connect that, Bob, just to connect that thought then, and this is perhaps a silly question, but since the the new, under the proposed rule, type 2 would not, it would be clear that this will only impact type 1 and not type 2. At what point in the process is it determined that something is a 1 or a 2? Because by the time you're here, it's already determined that you're either a 1 or a 2 and either subject or not subject to that.
At the very beginning of the process, lead agencies will determine what the classification is.
Okay, and that's not changed, that part of the process is not changed. Thank you.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi. So I have a question. I mean, right now, it seems that, you know, the thresholds are fairly low, as you said. You know, whether these actions are balancing several different policies, you know, generally, it seems there's more discretion, right, in whether there's impact. And my question is, you know, now that the WRP policies will sort of preside and be the, you know, deciding factor, how are those policies determined? And are they, you know, are we taking a risk that there are other sort of competing policies that we no longer will be taking into consideration?
So a fair question. So the newly approved policies were taken through a extensive public outreach process. So it followed locally it followed the local 197A procedures. And so the proposed policies were first presented to the commission, which started the process, and then sent to every planning, every community board, every borough president, and hearings were held at the request of each of these community boards or borough boards, and that took approximately a year and a half at the local review.
I guess, you know, I think about, you know, the One NYC plan, and, you know, clearly there's a lot in there that affects directly and indirectly, you know, what we do with our waterfront, and how do we ensure that the WRP remains consistent with that document, which itself, you know, is revised on a regular basis.
That's right. So the WRP policies are intended to really be the long-term policies and are really broad policy statements. And everything that's within One NYC, particularly the projects that are described in One NYC, are almost certainly, provided that they are required to have environmental review, are going to be individually assessed against the WRP policies. But it's also important to note that the WRP policies now approved by local, state, and federal are, just to be clear, are not the subject of the discussion today. We're discussing the procedures for how we administer them, just to be clear.
True, but we're at a position
Yes, I just want to
where,
be clear.
yeah, okay.
Ms. Efron.
Thank you, and thanks for being so clear about all of this. Is there anything in these rules changes that will either reduce the cost to the city or local municipality participating with the city or increase the speed with which changes are made?
Well, one of the things that actually will increase the speed is that for non-CPC actions, we are giving ourselves 30 days. The department is giving itself 30 days to make a determination. And so that will speed things along. I would have to say, though, in my experience with the department for now 11 years, typically it's not the WRP review that holds up projects. It's the other environmental reviews so the other environmental permits typically take a lot longer. And that is something that we have been working on other fronts, working with our state and federal regulators to try to clarify what is expected of applicants in advance, but separate and apart from the WRP.
I guess the point of my question was if there's any way to speed up change, certainly it would be great to know. Thanks.
Any other questions for Michael? If not, I ask, not I like your spirit. I will ask for your assent to publish the rules, which will then, after hearing, come back for adoption. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and good to see this process getting underway.
Very good, thank you.
Let's now advance to item number 2, is proposed zoning map from M11 to R6B and zoning text amendments to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area on properties located at 14 through 18 Carroll Street in Community District 6, Brooklyn. Now, presenter is Connie Chung, who's the lead project planner for this project.
Good afternoon. The applicant, 1418 Carroll LLC, is seeking a zoning map amendment and a zoning text amendment to facilitate the development of a residential building on 3 vacant lots in the Columbia Street waterfront neighborhood in the borough of Brooklyn, Community District 6. So, in this photo, this space right here, actually, pointed here, is where the proposed development site is located. The zoning map amendment would rezone 3 tax lots from an M11 to an R6B district, thereby extending the neighboring R6B district to include the development site. Additionally, the zoning text amendment would establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area coterminous with the rezoning area. The block within which the development site is located, which is block 352, located here, and the block directly to the north, which is block 347, have been the subject of a series of zoning changes that are similar to this application in changing existing M11 districts to residential districts in order to facilitate residential development. In 2007, there were 2 such zoning map changes, one on each of these blocks, that changed an M11 to an R6 district at the time. So on the subject block, it was this little portion here that was rezoned. More recently, in 2011, there were another 2 zoning map changes that were adopted from an M11 to an R6B district. Again, one on each of these 2 blocks. And at that time, there were 6 tax lots located here, so that brought the western edge of the R6B to where it is today. In 2009, an approximately 86-block area of the Carroll Gardens and Columbia Street waterfront neighborhoods were rezoned from an R6 district to contextual zoning districts in order to reflect the scale and built character of the area. So on this map, we're kind of just to orient ourselves, this is Van Brunt Street here. So Columbia Street waterfront neighborhood is located here. Carroll Gardens is located further to the east. And we have the Port Authority here, Pier 10, and Red Hook is kind of the gateway to Red Hook. The proposed development site is located at 1418 Carroll Street, which is block 352, lots 16, 17, and 18. These lots are currently vacant and comprise a total of 6,229 square feet with 70 feet of frontage on Carroll Street and depths ranging from 100 to 74 feet. The development site is located in an M11 district that is adjacent to an R6B district to the east. This M11 district is characterized by a mix of industrial, non-conforming residential, and mixed-use buildings, as well as vacant lots. The R6B district to the east is characterized by 3 to 4 story attached single and multifamily residential buildings. There's a C24 overlay located here along Columbia Street, which is the primary retail corridor of the neighborhood, and is characterized by 3 to 4 story attached residential and mixed-use buildings. To the west of the M11 district is an M21 district located here. And this area is characterized by industrial, transportation, and utility uses, auto-related uses, as well as vacant lots. And this area is part of the Southwest Brooklyn Industrial Business Zone. There are a number of parks, as well as community gardens located in this area as well. The development site is served by the B61 bus, which runs north-south along Columbia Street and connects this area with downtown Brooklyn to the north and Red Hook to the south. And 5 blocks to the east is the Carroll Street station at Smith Street, which provides access to the F and the G subway lines. So here are some photos of the existing conditions. So we're looking at Carroll Street, and then taking a closer look again at the proposed development site. And here are some photos of the developments directly across the street. The proposed development is a 4-story, 10-unit residential building that has a total of approximately 12,450 square feet of residential floor area, for a floor area ratio of 2.0. There's an entrance to a driveway is located right here on Carroll Street that will provide entrance to and egress from a driveway that leads to 6 accessory parking spaces located in the back of the building. Because this application includes a rezoning from a non-residential zoning district to a district that allows residential uses as of right, a mandatory inclusionary housing area that is coterminous with the rezoning area would be established. All residential developments, enlargements, and conversions within this mandatory inclusionary housing area that meet the criteria set forth in the mandatory inclusionary program would have to comply with the requirements of either option 1 or option 2. Option 1 requires that 25% of residential floor area be affordable to households that average 60% of the area median income, with a minimum of 10% of all residential floor area being affordable to households at 40% of the area median income. Option 2 requires that 30% of the residential floor area be affordable to households that average 80% of the area median income. To facilitate this project, the applicant requests a zoning map amendment to rezone 3 tax lots from an M11 to an R6B district, as well as a zoning text amendment to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area that's coterminous with the rezoning area.
Thanks, Connie. Questions? Ms. Efron?
I have 2 different questions. One is whether this property itself, the one in the rendering, would be required to have mandatory inclusionary housing since it's at the threshold of 12,000.
That's right. So the zoning text amendment would map a mandatory inclusionary housing area on the rezoning area. So that would exist, and depending on the actual development itself, it would depend on whether or not the program requirements are triggered.
Okay, that's one. And then the second is, given that this neighborhood potentially could have the BQX within it, could you explain the relationship between the BQX and any work the department is doing on planning around that and this particular neighborhood? I don't know specifically where it would go, but it's somewhere right around there.
Got it. So I think that in terms of the BQX planning on this specific development, I would say that it's that's a long-term kind of plan that's a little bit, grander in scale, and that wasn't particularly kind of a point of a major feature that was discussed in the context of this project. But it's certainly something that,
I think
is part
it's
of the conversation.
a little premature to be planning around the BQX when we don't know entirely yet its both feasibility and its alignment. So when that becomes clearer, then I think we can plan around that. But at the moment, it's although very seriously being pursued by the city, it's an idea rather than a concrete proposal that we could take into account when we do our planning at the moment. Hopefully that will come together in the very near future. Any other questions? Ms. Delos?
Hi, Connie, 2 things. One is, 3 things. If the BQX does come, it will definitely make commuting easier for these people, because even though it's only 5 blocks, it's uphill. And it's some pretty big blocks. But the question I really had is this property in the flood zone, or is that just across the street?
So the lot is actually, a portion of these tax lots is located in the 100-year flood zone, and a portion is located in the 500-year flood zone. The building is sited in such a way that there's no portion of the building itself that's in the 100-year floodplain. So
So this rendering does not show it taking into account having to abide by the new rules
So
related to
it's a
that?
little bit hard to, maybe if we go here, so for example, this isn't a great, maybe this is actually better. It might be a little bit hard to see, but the flood zone, it's kind of, it's like a portion of it,
Mhm.
and the building, all parts of the building. So that rendering is accurate, and that no part of that building is actually located in the 100-year floodplain.
But 10 feet away it is.
That's right.
Okay. And so that, based on the applicant's current proposal, it doesn't seem as though they'd quite trigger MIH, is that correct?
That's right. They're below the program thresholds.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Connie? If not, certified.
Thanks, Connie. Let's now move to item number 3, page 16, proposed site selection and acquisition of property in the Westchester Square neighborhood of the Bronx to facilitate the Westchester Square Replacement Branch Library. Our presenter is Dana Driscoll, lead project planner from the Bronx office. Item number 3, page 16.
Good afternoon. Commissioners, the New York Public Library and DCAS are applicants for the site selection and acquisition of a part of the location 9 Westchester Square, which is in the Westchester Square neighborhood of Community District 10. The acquisition is intended to provide a new space for a branch library for the neighborhood, replacing an existing facility, outmoded facility on Reade Street. We will go through the information. Again, this is in the Westchester Square neighborhood of Community District 10. This is an important sort of transit node, and it connects Unionport, Morris Park, Westchester Square neighborhoods within the Bronx. It's a mixed-use area to the lower right or east. We have industrial uses along Westchester Creek. To the east, out of the graphic frame, we have the Parkchester planned community, some low-rise housing directly to the west of the project site. In the neighborhood, Westchester Avenue is the site of the elevated number 6 IRT line. Westchester Square stop is immediately adjacent to the project location. East Tremont Avenue is a major commercial strip, one of the longer east-west connectors in the borough of the Bronx. The need for this proposal relates to the current location of the library, the smaller graphic to the upper left. That is the existing library facility. In addition to its size, it's old, is not ADA compliant, and physically is not configured to work with the new image or the new approach to libraries, which are moving away from exclusively stacks and research, and sort of reinventing itself as a kind of a community center, providing spaces for community gatherings. And for that reason, the intention is to subdivide. This is the existing property, which is now owned by the Huntington Free Library. This is a landmark building, and in addition to the library structure, the landmark structure itself, there is an annex building built in 1930, which is landmark eligible, but is not landmarked. That will be part of the subdivided portion of the lot that will be used for the new branch facility. In addition, there is a one-story enclosed connector connecting the main landmark building with the annex building. Under the proposal, the existing lot of approximately 22,000 square feet will be subdivided. The free library will continue to operate independently on approximately 13,000-foot reconfigured zoning lot. A new zoning lot will be created of approximately 9,000 square feet, and that will be the location of the new branch library. Here we have some images. Again, this is designed to be LEED eligible, ADA compliant, and the format is designed to, to reflect the new service modality, if you will. There will be 12,000 square feet of floor area on a two-story building. As the diagram here shows, there will be one sort of management kiosk that provides visual access and control of the entire floor. There will be a community room available for use for community activities, new furnishings. This will be, again, LEED eligible. To the extent possible, the green design elements are included. And there will be a new entranceway created along Westchester Avenue, which will include landscaping and a sitting area for the public. In addition, the grounds will be fully landscaped. The Landmarks Commission has been informed that is approving of both the proposed development project. There will be no impact on the landmarked Huntington Free Library other than the repair of the connection where the corridor linked to the annex building. There will be a landmarks determination, or has been, I should say, I'm sorry, in your package, determination that there will be no significant effects of this proposal.
Thank you, Dana. Questions?
Yes.
Ms. Efron, then Ms. Ortiz.
Is the Huntington Free Library operating as a library now?
It is operating as a private, private research library, and it is Landmark and will continue to operate independently.
Even though it's being acquired by,
Well, we're requiring a portion of the lot, not inclusive of the main building of the Huntington Free Library.
sorry,
We are getting approximately 9,000 of the 20-some thousand, right. So the library will continue to operate independently. DCAS will acquire the newly created zoning lot, and that will be the site of the new branch library.
thank you.
And my understanding is the Huntington Free Library is outside the NYPL
It
library
is
system.
independent of the public library system and will continue to operate independently.
Ms. Ortiz,
My question was answered, thank you.
any other questions? Ms. Levin?
You know, I realize that design is not exactly our purview on this one, but this looks like a really intriguing design. And on, I think it's the page, that one, that right there.
Yes.
The thing that is like a diagonal that looks like an escalator, is that an escalator? What is that?
It's not an escalator, it is a stairway up. Again, you're going to have the open design. The intention is to maximize the natural light. Building is configured essentially to provide a view of the landmark Huntington Library next door.
I see. Okay, so there'll be a main entrance at the street level?
Right.
And then what happens going up the stairs? Is that a secondary entrance?
Well, again, the community room will be on the ground floor, and this sort of open design that we talked about, that is the, I guess, current configuration that the new library facilities will adopt.
Pretty nifty looking.
Any other questions? Okay, certified. Thank you, Dana.
Let's now advance to item number 4, page 30, proposed zoning text amendment to remove CD 10, Brooklyn CD 10, from the applicability of a BSA special permit concerning enlargements to single and two-family detached and semi-detached residences. Our presenter is Richard Jacobs, lead project planner in the Brooklyn office. Item number 4, page 30.
Good afternoon, Chairman Weisbrod, Commissioners. This application is for a zoning text amendment to a BSA Board of Standards and Appeals Special Permit, ZR 73-622, enlargements of single and two-family detached and semi-detached residences. Community Board 10, as applicant, is proposing the removal of Community District 10 from its current applicability under the existing regulations. The special permit currently applies to 3 full community districts, Brooklyn's Community District 10, 11, and 15, and a specific R2 area in CD 14. Removing CD 10 from the special permit would not facilitate a specific project or induce any new development. To the contrary, enlargements of single and two-family homes in CD 10 would be required to adhere to the as-of-right residential zoning regulations or rely on other pre-established discretionary remedies to afford relief. CD 10 is one of 18 community districts in the borough of Brooklyn. It's located in the southwest portion of the borough and includes the neighborhoods of Bay Ridge, Fort Hamilton, and Dyker Heights. It has a population of approximately 123,000, and it's predominantly a lower-density residential neighborhood, with 66% or 2/3 of its residential land use devoted to 1- and 2-family dwellings. It's generally bounded by the Long Island Railroad, Bay Ridge Railroad cut to the north, 14th Avenue to the east, Lower New York Bay to the south. You can see the Verrazano Bridge at the southern end, and the Upper Bay to the north and west. Within the community district is a special Bay Ridge district. That's that large gray area, which is from the midpoint west. The special district has rules limiting community facilities. Their FAR and height working in concert with the lower density and contextual districts mapped in the department-initiated 2005 249 block Bay Ridge rezoning and the department's 2007 160 block Dyker Heights rezoning. These lower density and contextual districts include the 1- and 2-family R2, R31, R3A, R3X, R4A, R4B, and R41, and the multifamily R32 and R5B fronting many of the tree-lined avenues and most mid-blocks. The multifamily and mid-density districts, R6A, R6B, R7A, and R7B, are mapped along the wide streets, including 3rd, 4th, 5th Avenue, Shore Road, Fort Hamilton Parkway, 11th and 13th Avenue. These wide streets have larger apartment buildings ranging from 4 to 8 stories, and with some exceptions, commercial overlays ranging from C1 and C2s along the local retail, allowing for local retail servicing the residential areas. Now, the history of the BSA special permit. Back on December 22nd, 1997, the Planning Commission approved an application creating a new BSA special permit, the enlargement of single-family and two-family detached and semi-detached residences, originally intended as a citywide initiative. During the City Planning Commission public review process, the applicability was restricted to 7 community districts: Brooklyn 10, 11, 15, and portions of Brooklyn's 12 and 14, and Staten Island's 1 and 2. Subsequent to the Planning Commission's approval, the City Council modified the text amendment, removing the Staten Island community districts 1 and 2. Though today limited to 4 community districts, the February 1997 Planning Commission report discusses the overall land use rationale for approving this special permit, citing the advent of contextual districts approved in 1989 and their more liberal FAR, front, side yard, height, and setback requirements that match the character of many low-density areas, reducing the degree of noncompliance. But as many of the low-density areas of the city had not been mapped as contextual districts and large numbers of residential buildings still remain non-complying, there was a need for an equitable process where homeowners who wish to enlarge could in a manner consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. The Planning Commission, in their consideration, recognized the need for an alternative method for allowing the upgrading of an aging housing stock, as most of the city's lower-density housing stock was designed for lifestyles that had significantly changed over time. Many households desired additional bathrooms, upgraded kitchens, family rooms, and additional bedrooms that necessitate many major structural changes to existing homes with which they could otherwise leave the city. So, in response, the department proposed a BSA special permit that would have regulations related to how the enlargement would impact the surrounding area. The special permit would be available, again, only single and two-family detached and semi-detached residences, and would permit increases in floor area and up to a 10-foot encroachment into a required 30-foot rear yard. Encroachments would also be permitted into required side yards, but only in order to allow a vertical straight line extension. No encroachments would be permitted in required front yards. Permitted walls in R2X, R3, R4, and R41 districts would be allowed to increase in height only in order to match the character of neighborhood houses which had taller perimeter walls. And finally, a BSA must find that the enlarged building would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or district in which the building is located, or impair the future use or development of the surrounding area. Then again, in the year 2000, the Planning Commission approved an amendment to the special permit removing Community District 12 from applicability. In this instance, the as-of-right optional provisions for certain R5 and R6 districts in Brooklyn had already established controls permitting enlargements in Borough Park, and by removing the text from the BSA special permit and adding a 10-foot rear yard encroachment to the optional provisions, the redundancy was eliminated. So the proposed project, the proposal seeks to remove Community District 10 from the special permit. CB10 believes the original intent, allowing existing residential relief for residents from noncompliances, providing for limited enlargement in order to remain in their community, has been misapplied and to a certain extent is no longer necessary. CB10 describes in their application how since its adoption by the City Council in February 1998, only 21 applications have been made within the Community 10 district. Of those 21 applications, 10 or half were disapproved by Community Board 10, with one no position taken. Of those disapproved, all were approved by the Board of Standards and Appeals. Community Board 10 members believe that the original land use justification, the applicability, and the limited enlargement for existing residents to remain has been predominantly used to legalize existing illegal conditions or promote luxury housing for speculative sale or purchase. They further argue that the lower density and contextual districts mapped extensively in 2005 and 2007, approximately 400 blocks, were not mapped when the initial text was supported and approved, and they more than adequately provide the fine-grained zoning controls to enlarge residences in keeping with the built form and character of most blocks. Community Board 10 voted 4 times over the last 13 years to remove Community District 10 from the special permit. Again, they believe that future enlargements should adhere to the as-of-right residential regulations or proceed with established relief offered by BSA variance or provided under an alternative existing special permit at the BSA, one that limits enlargements to 10%. From the department's point of view, CD10 is unique in so far as they had a special district that predates the text. Subsequent to the text, lower density and contextual districts were widely mapped throughout the district, some 400 blocks. There's a limited number of applications for CD10. There have only been 21 applications over the last 18 years. By comparison, Boards 14 and 15, there have been well over 200 in each of those districts, again, in excess of 200 applications. So it's just the text, which just takes out 10. You can see from this graphic that the 21 applications are widely spread throughout the district, not concentrated in any particular area. The first slide shows the house on the left is the enlarged house, enlarged by some 20%. The house in and of itself is not an unattractive house, it's the proximity to the adjacent property. Again, the special permit allows a vertical extension in the non-complying side yard. So the typical side yard is 8 feet, or in some cases 10 feet in the district, and you can see the 3 houses here have that 8-foot separation, whereas the enlarged house, or reconstructed house in this instance, has very little space between the 2 houses. Similarly, this property that was enlarged by some 70% above what's permitted FAR also is very close to the adjacent house. Again, this is not just an enlargement for a bedroom, it's a complete reconstruction. You're seeing from the front, you really can't see what's happening in the back. Again, in the back, this was an enlargement in the back as well. You only need to have a 20-foot side yard, so again, this is a front, side, and rear yard enlargement. Whereas the house on the left is not much of a problem. This is a decent-sized house. Again, the problem is the adjacent house to the right. In the last instance, the roof line or the streetscape shows a very similar context. And then you have this house that has an enlargement at the attic, and a separate enlargement at the side, and again in the rear. And the community board is very concerned with their unique character and streetscape, dating back to their special district and their contextual district regulation. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Richard? Mr. Knuckles.
Thank you, Richard. This is very interesting. So henceforth, you wouldn't be able to go to BSA in this particular district if you wanted to modify your residence.
Well, you'd have to either follow the underlying district regulations
Right.
if you had available floor area.
Right.
But you could not increase a degree of noncompliance, no. Only under a variance or a separate special permit that is existing, which limits you to 10%.
Okay. I'm just curious, are there any other districts beyond this one where a similar kind of provision exists? I mean, citywide?
Citywide, well, the special permit that I mentioned about the 10% is citywide. Is allowed citywide, that 10% limitation. Again, this special permit applies to 10, 11, 15, and parts of 14 today. Originally, it was contemplated a citywide application.
Right.
But it was back in 1997. It was reduced to
Rebuffed,
just
yeah.
these community boards, which has been reduced further by the council that took out Staten Island. And again, Ward 12 has been removed because of the optional provisions, which were duplicitous.
Thank you.
Ms. Levin.
Also, Richard, you explained that Board 10, or District 10, is unique because they've had relatively few of these applications. And then mentioned that there'd been so many more applications particularly in 11 and 15. And so I guess that begs the question, is the problem even worse in 11 and 15, getting
Well, not
more
11.
of
11
these?
only had 2.
Ah.
But 14 had 232, 15 had 217.
So
So
the
is it
arguments,
worse?
yeah, I mean, the arguments that that Board 10 advances for the elimination of the permit in their district, would they also apply in those other districts? Should we be looking at a broader amendment to get rid of this special permit altogether? Have those districts been contextually mapped
They
in the
haven't
same
to the
way that?
extent that District 10 has. And District 10 does have unanimity in wanting to withdraw this application, withdraw their district from the special permit, as witnessed by the votes they've taken over the years. Within the other districts, there may not be such unanimity.
Is this
there are-
issue under discussion in those other districts? Has there been concern about these out-of-context enlargements?
Not to a
No.
large extent, no, not like here,
And this does have a special district, which
yes.
is not present
Which the other
elsewhere.
two do not.
Do not.
Yeah.
More than half of the district is a special district, judging, going back to the 70s, which was designed to preserve the character of the lower density neighborhood. So yes, a large part of it is historically tried to preserve. CD10 did support the
Right.
initial
I
application,
noticed that.
thinking that it would provide for limited enlargement. But again, their experience over the past 18 years, almost 2 decades, is that it's being used for other purposes, and their objections are being.
Right, well, it appears that at the time it was put in place, the argument was it would allow individual homeowners to improve the homes that they would continue to own and occupy.
To stay in the neighborhood.
And stay in the neighborhood, and now we've seen much more speculative use of
Exactly.
this feature, and so, anyway, very interesting.
Any other questions for Richard? If not, we will refer this out to the Community Board for 45 days, and presumably we'll get a positive response.
Probably get it back pretty quick.
This is proceeded with maximum speed. Thank you, Richard.
For the record, I just wanted to note that Commissioner Edie recused on the previous item, the Westchester Square Replacement Branch Library. And now we'll move to item number 5, page 105, proposed renewal of a previously approved special use permit to facilitate a fire station in a residential district to be located at 305 Cross Bay Boulevard. Our presenter is Brendan Pollard, who's the lead project planner in the Queen's office. Item number 5, page 105.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'd like to take a few minutes to take you out to Broad Channel, Queens this afternoon.
Good idea.
It's an island community located in the middle of Jamaica Bay and home to 2,500 year-round residents. And this is the setting where the community's volunteer fire department has been providing emergency services for over 100 years. And they would very much like to build a new fire station. To do so, however, they need a special permit that was approved in 2011, renewed for an additional 3 years. The firefighters were not able to get to the substantial completion of the firehouse within the 4 years provided by the special permit, so that is why they are before you for this renewal. So the zoning resolution does allow the City Planning Commission to renew previously approved special permits pursuant to Section 1143. And as I mentioned, this would provide the Broad Channel volunteers with 3 years to construct a firehouse in an R32 district. Fire stations are not allowed as of right in residence districts. Now, this is not the first special permit that the Broad Channel volunteers had. They had a special permit in 2004, but the firehouse was never built, and the permit expired in 2008. They came back to the City Planning Commission for a second special permit to facilitate the same firehouse construction. That special permit became effective in December 2011 and is the subject of this renewal application. Just to orient you where the existing firehouse site is, it is located on a relatively dense residential block on Knoll Road in the middle of Broad Channel. The firehouse, as you see in the bottom picture here, was built in 1907, and that is where the Broad Channel Volunteer Fire Department provide the emergency services at Broad Channel. And I'm highlighting here in the picture that the building is actually so small that they don't have the space to park all of their vehicles in the station itself, so they often need to find on-street, or in this case, on-sidewalk parking. But they have acquired, dating back to 1999, a vacant site that was formerly city-owned to the north of the current firehouse location, where they'd like to build a new 2-story, 10,000 square foot fire station. They've secured all the funding that they need for the project. It's just a matter of getting that funding passed through the various agencies that have identified it for them. Here's a site plan of the firehouse that was, the plan of the firehouse that was approved in 2011. As I mentioned, a 2-story building, 10,000 square feet, and the Broad Channel volunteers feel that this new building would provide them a new modern facility that would allow them to better serve the Broad Channel community. And here's an elevation of the firehouse, again, 2 stories, and would provide plenty of space for the Broad Channel volunteers to park their 4 trucks and the 1 boat that they have that allows for responses to emergencies under the waters of Jamaica Bay. Now, as I mentioned, the permit can be renewed through City Planning Commission approval, so long as the commission finds that the findings, the facts based on which the original special permit was approved have not substantially changed. So the project site has not substantially changed, the project has not substantially changed, and the Broad Channel volunteers maintain that the findings based on the facts based on the original special permit have also not substantially changed. In your commission packages, we did refer this out to Community Board 14 for 45 days, and they provided a letter continuing to express their support for the Broad Channel volunteers to build a fire station.
Any questions? Mr. Cantor.
So the renewal allows an applicant to come back twice for 2 3-year periods. So this would be the first time and hopefully the last time they need to renew the special permit.
They had a separate special permit before, right?
They had a special permit which would have facilitated, but that expired. So they had to apply for a new one, and that special permit, that new one, is the subject of this renewal request.
Ms. Deleuze.
I just want to make sure they've secured all of their funding at this point.
Yes. They've passed the hat, the proverbial boot around. They've done a lot of their own fundraising. They're getting some help through post-Sandy disaster recovery funds from both FEMA and the New York State Governor's Office. So they have identified all of their funding needs for this $5.6 million firehouse.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I will entertain or ask for your assent to send a letter of approval to the Buildings Department. All in favor? Aye, unanimous. Thank you. What? It's good. Thank you, Mr. Dwyer.
So moving right along to item number 6, page 124, we have the Long Island City Business Improvement District consisting of the North and South sub-districts. I'd like to introduce Dylan Sandler, whose staff, a new member of staff with the Housing, Economic, and Infrastructure Planning Division. He's making his very first presentation today before the City Planning Commission. We're on item number 6, page 124.
Good afternoon. So I'm presenting on a proposal to expand the existing Queens Plaza Court Square Business Improvement District to create a new, larger Long Island City Business Improvement District. This is in Community Districts 1 and 2 in Queens, and the bid is sponsored by the Long Island City Partnership, and this is one program of many that they administer in the greater Long Island City area. This map shows the location of the existing bid, which will now be the North Subdistrict in orange, and the proposed expansion which is in green, which would be referred to as the South Subdistrict. The North Subdistrict includes properties along Jackson Avenue north of Court Square and businesses along Queens Plaza. The South Subdistrict includes properties along Jackson Avenue south of Court Square, along Vernon Boulevard and 44th Drive. For a bit of context, the bid comprises much of the commercial core of Long Island City. Also, to the north and east of the bid area, there is a concentration of industrial businesses, but the bid has decided not to include these in the bid service area because the needs of these businesses tend to vary from the commercial businesses at the core, and initial outreach suggested that they were less interested in being a part of this bid. Since 2001, there have been a number of zoning actions affecting most of Long Island City, and there's currently a significant amount of new residential and commercial growth in this area. In 2013, there were more than 2,000 businesses that employed nearly 46,000 people. So looking at the existing North Subdistrict, there are 2.8 million square feet of office currently, and another 1.1 million square feet in planning. What's really staggering here is there are 669 residential units and 4,085 in planning or construction. There are 47 existing businesses. These include a few large corporate back offices, a number of retail businesses, and 2 hotels. And presumably, as many of those residential units come online in the next several years, there will be more retail and other businesses in that area as well. So then looking at the proposed South Subdistrict, this is a much more mixed area and has quite a few more businesses. There are 190 businesses. Many of these are located along Vernon Boulevard on the west side of the proposed bid. And this is really the main commercial spine of the area. Many of these are in 2 to 3 story buildings, often with retail or professional services on the ground floor and residential above. There are also 18 industrial businesses. Many of these are lighter industry, auto repair, and general contracting. And there's also a lot of residential growth. 2,700 units are in planning or construction in the South Subdistrict. These photos give you an idea of the character of some of the streets in the South Subdistrict. On the bottom left is Vernon Boulevard. This is a typical 3-4 story mixed building. And on the bottom right, along 44th Drive, this shows you some of the mixed neighborhoods with some auto repair mixed in with residential development. In the South Subdistrict, the proposed expansion area, there are 2 large office buildings. This one at 2 Court Square, it houses Citigroup and CUNY Law School. And then Hunters Point Plaza, a few blocks to the south on Jackson Avenue. There's several small public spaces that are both within the bid area and some of them adjacent to the bid area, but within the general corridor of the bid. The image on the top left is from the Citibank building. This is maintained by Citibank. On the bottom left is a vegetated median along Jackson Avenue. The bid currently maintains this area with funding from EDC. And then on the right side, there are a couple of images of parks that are, small parks that are along the bid corridor but are excluded from the bid service area. And the bid has explained that they would be supportive of efforts to maintain and enhance these areas, but they do not want to take on full responsibility for their maintenance. Proposed services of the bid mainly include sidewalk and street maintenance, including sidewalk sanitation and tree planting, informational boards and wayfinding and pedestrian crossing enhancements, and there's also funding for marketing. The proposed first-year budget is $800,000. They have separate budgets for the north and south sub-districts to reflect different needs of those streets. So $450,000 for the north sub-district, $350,000 for the south sub-district. The bid has projected that 60% of properties would pay $660 or less in their assessment for the first year. The Long Island City Partnership did outreach to assess the level of community support. There were 626 properties surveyed, and of those, 122 responded. 119 of those 122 were in favor of the bid, and 3 were opposed. This went to both Community Boards 1 and 2, and they both voted in favor. So that's all I have prepared. I'm happy to take questions.
Questions for Dylan? Mr. Knuckles.
Thank you. This is your first time, Dylan?
It is.
Congratulations. Very well.
Hopefully it won't be your last, Dylan. He's not going to
We'll
ask.
see how it
I
goes.
guarantee you a second appearance. No, I guess my first impression is, given the configuration of these and the geography of the second proposed bid in contrast to the first, why is there a smaller budget for the south sub-district, 350 versus 450? Economies of scale and everything.
I may refer that one to Barry if
Yeah.
I actually don't know.
You know, they have, the south sub-district has a lot of very small properties. Generally, the character is more small, your typical New York City, small retail space, and then like 2 apartments above. And so there was a lot of concern about cost and a lot of concern from the property owners about maintaining cost. And where the north is much bigger buildings, is bigger office buildings. So the level of service there is just larger. And here, they're just trying to keep costs down.
It's a pre-hearing item, so
Okay.
it will appear in the calendar on Wednesday as well.
Ms. Efron and Ms. Ortiz.
I couldn't tell from the map if the NYCHA housing is included or not.
The
It's
NYCHA
boxed in, but,
The NYCHA housing is across the street from it, but is not included.
okay. And do you want to give us a preview of the 4 people who dissented on Community Board 2?
There was some discussion about whether this would benefit whether this would benefit tenants as much as it would benefit business owners or property owners. And with the conversation around the fact that the bid steering committee, or the bid board would be made up primarily of property owners. And there was some question of whether the bid, in addition to the services they're providing, could take an advocacy role to, in some way, regulate or control rents for tenants. The bid explained that really isn't their purpose and that wasn't their intention.
Helpful, thank you.
I assume, Dylan, that the proposed assessment here would be assessing the commercial property as opposed to residential property? Is that correct?
Yes, so residential property would have a $1 per year assessment. The actual assessment formula varies slightly between the north and the south sub-district. Because there are more mixed buildings in the south sub-district, they use the street frontage of commercial, the linear foot frontage of commercial properties. They weigh that more heavily than the assessed value of the property in the south sub-district. But it is based on the foot frontage, the linear foot frontage and the assessed value of commercial properties.
So just as an example, if it's a mixed-use building with commercial on the bottom and residential above, how, do we know how that's
Yeah.
planning to be assessed?
Well, so in the north sub-district, 60% of the assessment would be calculated from the assessed value of the property. 40% of it would be from the linear foot frontage of commercial property. And for commercial space that is above the first floor, it is 50%. It, is calculated as 50% of the linear space. In the south sub-district, it's 30% of assessed value for the building, and then 70% of the linear foot frontage of commercial property within that space.
Ms. Ortiz, and then Ms. Delausse, and then Mr. Reade.
Hi, thank you. Good presentation. A question, so, we've seen how the budget is distributed in terms of, the north-south, but how's the revenue distributed? Is it commensurate with what's coming in from the south sub-district is commensurate with what's going out? So I don't see a.
I believe that, I know they have proportional representation from the north and south sub-district, and I believe that the expenditures are also equivalent to what's coming in.
That's great.
Okay, could we see that information? Could that be provided, just the breakdown of what's coming in?
Yeah, they can provide that.
And the bid will be here at the public hearing on Wednesday and can also speak to that, but we'll make sure we get that information.
And another question, I have some familiarity with this district, and having looked for office space in this district, I can tell you it's very hard to find office space. It's an increasingly popular place for businesses. And there's tremendous amount of residential construction. It's becoming less of an office district and much more of a mixed-use area. And so it strikes me, I guess this is a bigger picture issue, that, we have a district where the commercial property owners and tenants are contributing the bulk or majority, or, I don't know what percentage, it would be useful to know, into improvements along, what is a very mixed-use neighborhood district, and, to make sure that the residents have a say in this too, because they're partners in a way. You probably find much more so in a neighborhood than in a typical office district. So with that said, it would be helpful to hear from the organizer sort of how they addressed that issue and how it came up, because it's not your typical office or downtown district. So that's a question outstanding that I have. And the other is the $1 residential assessment. So that means that in a co-op situation, the co-op pays $1, and in a condo situation,
In a condo situation,
every individual condo
every
owner?
individual condo pays $1. If you have a building that's purely residential and is a co-op, it's one tax lot, and so then that building, no matter how many units would add, they
Is
would pay
one.
$1.
So do we know, and what's anticipated in terms of these new residential units? They're probably all co-ops, many of them are coming on as
I
co-ops.
think it's mostly rental, but not.
Oh, really? A lot of rentals? Okay, so we're not gonna see much of a contribution from the residential side.
No.
But the $1 gets them a seat at the table.
Well,
Right.
by statute, the board of directors must have a residential representative, so there will be at least one residential representative.
As a voting
As a
member.
voting member.
But as we all know, the board as a whole has to be made up
Over
of
50%.
more than 50, a majority of commercial property owners. Ms. Delausse, and then Mr. Reade.
Most of my other questions were asked. My only question I have that I think that's left over is, and obviously this can be discussed on Wednesday, but perhaps you know, and welcome. Ambassador, in the budget, there's an ambassador for $20,000. What is, what does that person do? Do we know? Or I can ask on Wednesday.
I think that may be a question
Okay.
for the bid on
Good.
Wednesday.
Good to know.
Mr. Reade.
Yeah, and this may also fall over to Wednesday also, but in regards to the budgets, they have maintenance and sanitation in both, and I'm assuming they're gonna use the same services throughout the two districts, and so I'm assuming this is more of an allocation as opposed to a strict, contract amounts. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen more information about the contracts that they expect to use or that they're currently using. So I would assume the same thing, but I can't.
Okay, we'll learn more. Thank you.
And we anticipate both SBS and the bid itself will be testifying on
Yes.
Wednesday.
One quick follow-up.
Ms. Ortiz.
One quick question on the community support. So there's a large non-response rate. How is that compared to other bid formation efforts? We have about 80% non-responsive.
The main issue that SBS always has with this is obviously getting people to respond. What they want, though, is they want to see assessed value of people who will be paying. They want to make sure that they have at least a 51% response of the assessed value. And even though the numbers are relatively small, the major property owners, the ones who actually pay the biggest dollar, they're over 51% in terms of assessed value of people coming in the same support district.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, I do have the budget for the North District. The North District exists today. Is this budget for the North District that's proposed, is this significantly different from the budget for the North District that exists today, either in size or in allocation of services?
I believe it's a modest increase, taking their existing budget and then raising it to account for inflation.
And in terms of how and what services are allocated, it's essentially the same?
Same.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, public hearing on Wednesday.
Let's now advance to item number 7, page 133, proposed special bulk permit to facilitate mixed-use development in Community District 5, Manhattan. Our presenters are Beverly Jimenez Talavero, who's the lead project planner, and we also have John Mangan from the council's office, and who's also one of our subject matter experts on mandatory inclusionary housing. Item number 7, page 133.
Good afternoon, Commission members, Chairman Weisbrod. The applicant, 42 West 18th Street, Realty Corporation, is seeking a special permit pursuant to Section 74-711 to modify the bulk regulations affecting property at 3842 West 18th Street and 4143 West 17th Street. The proposed project is located on 3 tax lots, which are part of the same zoning lot, and are bounded by West 17th Street and West 18th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue. These properties are also situated within the Ladies Mile Historic District and within the C64A zoning district. The area has a mixed-use character of commercial, residential, and institutional uses, and has transitioned from manufacturing and commercial. Currently on lot 14 is a 4,600 square foot through lot with 25 feet of frontage on West 17th Street and West 18th Street. The existing historic building on this lot is a 6-story commercial building built in 1907 as a loft and a store. This 6.0 FAR building will remain and be restored. Lot 66 is in the center of the project area and is a 2,100 square foot lot which has 25 feet of frontage on West 18th Street. It contains an existing 4-story commercial building with an FAR of 3.37. This building will be enlarged by the proposed project. This 4-story historic building was originally built as a dwelling in 1865 and was converted to commercial use in the 1890s. The existing building contains a commercial use and will remain and be restored. Both buildings are contributing buildings to the Ladies Mile Historic District. Lot 15 is a 7,100 square foot lot and is an irregularly L-shaped lot parcel with 25 feet of frontage on West 18th Street and 50 feet of frontage on West 17th Street. This lot is currently used as an at-grade parking lot for 54 vehicles. This lot will be developed with a 16-story building segment fronting on West 17th Street and a 17-story segment fronting on West 18th Street. Both portions of the new building will have commercial and residential uses. The site is zoned C64A, which allows commercial, residential, and community facility uses with a base FAR of 10 and a bonusable 2-point FAR with a 12 FAR, with inclusionary housing. The C64A district is within the Ladies Mile Historic District, which allows an overall building height of 185 feet and allows a street wall to exceed a maximum base height of 125 feet up to 150 feet on a narrow street. The proposed developments on Lot 66 and Lot 15 are the subject of this application for waivers. The depth of the block between 17th and 18th Street is 184 feet. The proposed project includes the construction of a new building on Lot 15, the enlargement of an existing building on Lot 66, and the restoration of 2 existing historic buildings on Lot 66 and 14. Additionally, the existing building located on Lot 66 will be altered by removing 184 square feet of floor area from the ground floor, and that is shown in red in this graphic. A 3-story rear yard enlargement would be constructed, and the building on Lot 66 would fully occupy the tax lot. The enlargement to the building on Lot 66 will total 438 square feet and will result into a net increase in floor area of 292 square feet of retail and storage space in the existing building, which will continue to contain commercial uses. The applicant intends to develop an approximately 84,024 square foot mixed-use building containing 68,097 square feet of residential use, which will provide 66 units of market-rate housing, approximately 15,296 square feet of commercial space, a below-grade parking garage with 17 accessory parking spaces, and 39 bicycle parking spaces. Lot 15 would generate approximately 71,000 square feet of floor area. The building will utilize 13,024 square feet of unused development rights from the remainder of the zoning lot. At completion, the zoning lot will contain 118,831 square feet of development and achieve an 8.6 FAR, which will be less than the permitted maximum floor area of 138,000 square feet under a 10 FAR. The proposed building would have a residential lobby on both West 17th and West 18th Streets. There is a separate entrance on West 17th Street for the ground floor retail space. Lot 14 has one entrance on West 17th Street and one entrance on West 18th Street, and Lot 66 has an entrance on West 18th Street. The proposed development would require a special permit pursuant to Section 74-711 of the zoning resolution for development within a historic district to allow for waivers. At the time of certification, the applicant was requesting 4 waivers. Since that time, due to the approval of the Zoning for Quality of Life text amendment known as ZQA, the applicant currently only needs the following waivers. The first one is the maximum permitted base height in a C64A zoning district, which is 125 feet, and a 15-foot setback is required. The requested waivers would modify the front wall so that it may rise without setback above a maximum base height of 125 feet on West 17th Street. The building's West 18th Street wall will exceed the maximum height of 60 feet allowed for a building with less than 45 feet of frontage on a narrow street, and the West 18th Street facade would rise to 170 feet without setback. The second waiver is the minimum distance between windows, and the minimum required distance between buildings is 60 feet on a single zoning lot. The building facades on West 17th and West 18th Street will have a distance of 50 feet between them. According to the applicant, this will allow for building footprints that provide usable floor plates for residential use. The maximum permitted height for a building with less than 45 feet of frontage on a narrow street is 60 feet. The building's West 18th Street wall would rise to 170 feet. And according to the applicant, this would allow for a building facade that reflects the loft buildings that are characteristic of the neighborhood. Then there's the final waiver, and that's the rear yard waiver. And the West 17th Street front wall will encroach into the rear yard equivalent by 10 feet, resulting in 50 feet of rear yard equivalent. So section 74.711 says, in all districts for zoning lots containing a landmark designation by the Landmarks Preservation Commission, or for zoning lots with existing buildings located within a historic district designated by the Landmarks Preservation Commission, the City Planning Commission may permit modification of the use and bulk regulations except FAR regulations, provided that such bulk modification shall have minimal adverse effects on the structures or open space in the vicinity in terms of scale, location, and access to light and air. The design of the proposed building facades as approved by the Landmarks Preservation Commission will provide a street wall that is consistent with many mid-block buildings on West 17th and West 18th Streets between 5th and 6th Avenues that rise over 150 feet without setback. Community Board 5 held a public hearing on this project on May 12th of 2016, and by a vote of 40 opposed and 1 in favor with 3 abstentions, recommended denial of the application unless the mandatory inclusionary housing program is applied in accordance with the zoning resolution as defined in section 2392. They also feel that the rear yard requirements would also result in a negative impact to adjacent buildings. The borough president also recommended denial of the application unless the mandatory inclusionary housing program is applied to the proposed project, and feels that the requested waivers would have an adverse impact on nearby buildings on the block. At the time of certification, several commission members raised the following questions. How does the proposed project differ from that project proposed in 2004? According to the applicant, the previously approved project was an entirely different building designed by a different architect. The 2004 building design called for a 4-story enlargement on the 2 existing historic buildings, a 16-story building on West 17th Street, and a 13-story building on West 18th Street. One final question was asked. Are there other projects on the block with similar rear yard situations such as the proposed project? The answer to that is no. Other development on the block was a result of conversions and rehabilitation, not new construction, and did not have rear yard situations such as the proposed project.
Thank you, Beverly. And now we'll hear from John Mangan on the MIH issues.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As Beverly outlined, Community Board 5 and the Manhattan Borough President Office have raised questions as to whether MIH would apply to Adorama's application for a 74-711 special permit. And the short answer is no, that it wouldn't apply. MIH applies to special permits that would significantly increase permitted residential floor area. So the archetypal situation is, say, a 74 7-Eleven that was enabling new residential floor area within a manufacturing district. The proposed, MIH does not apply when an applicant is just seeking bulk modifications to reconfigure residential floor area that's already permitted. And since this development lies within an existing R10 equivalent district, and since none of the actions before the commission would or could increase residential capacity here, and since bulk modifications alone wouldn't trigger MIH, then MIH would not apply to this application. The commission anticipated this situation in the CPC report and was clear on the issue. I made copies of the relevant sections of the report and can distribute them through land use review after the review session. But applying MIH in this situation would go beyond the laws described by the commission in the CPC report. And thus, we believe that the commission wouldn't have the authority to apply MIH in this situation. Community Board 5 and the Manhattan Borough President's Office, they sort of further argued that the bulk modifications that are in front of the commission now would enable the development to, achieve more residential floor area than would be possible in the absence of these actions. And they sort of cite the increment between the with action and the no action scenario in the environmental review. We believe that even if the law permitted you to use such an increment for threshold questions, to use that increment as a basis for MIH applicability would really just embroil the commission in a bunch of sort of unresolvable metaphysical disputes over how much additional residential floor area the bulk modifications, really enabled. And if you're looking at environmental review, you're looking at sort of assumptions built on assumptions, and just that lacks the clarity and the definiteness that you get when talking about permitted residential FAR. And so that permitted residential FAR is what's used for threshold questions under MIH.
Thank you, John. Questions? Mr. Knuckles?
No, just, I for one would like to have a written opinion from our own edification.
Sure.
Yeah.
Ms. Levin?
Well, isn't the fundamental difference of view here, I think you alluded to it, the statute, the relevant provision of MIH that makes MIH available when a special permit is being applied for, uses the phrase would allow a significant increase in residential floor area. You want to read it to say available, you used a different word.
Permitted.
Permitted. They want to use it to say usable. Seems to me you could apply either meaning to this sentence. And we have what I presume are good faith statements by both the community board and the borough president that they understood it to mean usable, that if a project was making it possible to use more, to build more residential floor area, that then MIH would apply. So I think I share Commissioner Knuckles' interest in seeing this laid out in a little more detail, but I guess I would ask you, the community board has has a calculation in there about what the delta is here. And their math indicates that, in their view, this special permit would be making available or making possible 26 units, 26 additional units, and 22,367 zoning square feet. Are those, if you were to make the same calculation, even though it's metaphysical and you don't want to, you don't believe that it applies, have they calculated it correctly?
Okay, I'll take your questions in turn. You're correct that the relevant section of the text merely refers to residential floor area rather than permitted floor area or enabled floor area. But we need to ensure that we read that provision consistent with the other places in the zoning resolution where such phrases apply, where floor area is used. If you look at the zoning resolution, floor area always refers to permitted floor area as opposed to some other type of floor area, enabled, achievable, whatever. There are a very few exceptions to that rule where the zoning resolution may refer to permitted floor area, but those are sort of exceptions that prove the rule. They're referring to, say, the floor area in an already existing building as opposed to what you could build on a zoning lot under the existing resolution. And so we're often faced with the situation where people want us to include sort of redundancies in the zoning resolution. And, why didn't we put permitted floor area in there? I think it's because if we put redundancies in certain parts of the zoning resolution, then it calls into question
Why it's not
those
someplace else?
those other places in the zoning resolution where we haven't included that redundancy. And so just for legal reasons, structurally, we want to ensure that consistency from place to place. And I understand that that's something that we in the department understand, but isn't always clear to others. As for the understanding of the community board and the borough president, we did attempt to be as clear as, the commission attempted to be as clear as possible in the CPC report. And as I said, I'll distribute the relevant section. I mean, I can read it to you right now, if that would be helpful. The commission anticipates applying the MIH program to special permits that increase residential capacity. The program is not expected to be applied in conjunction with special permit applications that would reconfigure residential floor area that is already permitted under zoning without increasing the amount of residential floor area permitted. Under this policy, for instance, a special permit that facilitates the transfer of floor area from one zoning lot to another without increasing FAR would not be subjected to an MIH requirement, while a special permit that converts non-residential floor area to residential floor area would be. So there's your 7-Eleven in an M district, for instance.
Let me just add to what John said. It's, obviously, the posture of the department and the administration is to apply the potential of mandatory inclusionary zoning whenever possible. And, obviously our goal is to do that. For example, just today, we did go back and forth on the Carroll Street application and as to whether that would be appropriate for mandatory inclusionary zoning or not. And even though that particular development is not or may not take advantage of the full FAR that is being proposed, the fact that we're granting additional FAR and capacity under the zoning is the dispositive issue as to whether or not MIH will apply to that proposed zoning district if the commission approves it. I think we would certainly look to every situation where we think it can legally apply to apply it. I think the clearest analogy here is when we, as John said, exercise, for example, our special permit powers to convert what would not be residential use into residential use under zoning, thereby creating more residential capacity under zoning, as opposed to, so let's say, a special transfer in a landmark district from a landmark to a new development that in and of itself does not increase residential capacity, although increases residential capacity for the new development, but doesn't generally increase residential capacity. And when we did discuss this, when MIH was proposed and ultimately embraced by this commission, and that was, I think, the precise example that we used. And, beyond that, I do think that one of the reasons we wanted to be as specific as possible was to not get tied into the very enmeshed, really, in the very considerable practical difficulties of guessing, really, how a developer would use residential capacity in any individual case. But even before reaching that analysis, I think the law is what the law is, and I think that was fairly explicit here and fairly explicit, for sure, when the city council also embraced this. So, as speaking for myself, I'm highly sympathetic to what the community board and the borough president have said. But I do believe, as John and council's office here generally and staff have analyzed this, and also as was presented to the commission, we are operating, we are a society of laws, and we are operating under legal constraints. But I think John will provide a more detailed analysis to the commission, and we will have a hearing on this on Wednesday.
So, Carl, could I just ask one follow-up
Sure.
question then? So, taking this approach, which I don't mean to argue at this point, my mind is open, and I look forward to reading John's materials and to the public debate on this issue that I imagine we'll have in the public hearing. But does that mean then that whenever we're confronted with an application that is purely a bulk modification, MIH would never apply?
I'd have to think about that, but
And if
if
that
it's
were the
just a
case,
shifting of bulk or without in any way under
Well, this isn't a
zoning
shifting, it's an
expanding,
unlocking.
without in any way under zoning expanding available FAR, I would think that would be the case, but again, let me
Okay.
think
And
about
I think
that.
we have
and-
the situation where
and
some
I-
people may have, in planning this, some people may have been looking at it narrowly, and some people may have been looking at it broadly, and now now we find out that, we're speaking two different kinds of English.
Right,
But that's
but-
what happens when in a legislative process.
It is, and I dare say, again, just going back to what I said at the outset, our view as a department and as administration certainly is to apply it as broadly as possible as we can within the law. And our constraint is certainly not policy, but law. Ms. Delos.
I definitely, excuse me, look forward to the conversation as well. And I would just repeat the request that Commissioner Levin made about understanding whether or not the department's view of the community board's resolution related to the calculation is accurate or not.
Okay. Yeah, sorry to leave that question hanging out there. We have no reason to doubt the calculation embedded in the environmental review, but there's nothing to say that that calculation in the no-action scenario couldn't have much more residential floor area, and there's nothing to say that it couldn't have much less. The idea that I was trying to convey is that it's assumptions built on assumptions, and it's something that, and those assumptions are all debatable. And to embroil the commission in debates over those calculations would be a somewhat novel responsibility for the commission.
If we may, I really do appreciate the conversation. The only thing I can say is, if there really is a different way to interpret it, maybe there's not. This seems like a good reason to have a debate.
Sure, sure. I would also say that, I mean, when making the no action and with action assumptions in the environmental review, typically environmental review law generally, and we would encourage an applicant to estimate conservatively to present us with as large an increment as possible. And so they'd be faced with sort of kind of conflicting impulses in the situation. One, to sort of maximize that increment consistent with environmental review law. The other, to have an architect creatively, pack bulk in their no action so that the requested modifications are only creating, 10,000 square feet of residential floor area rather than 20,000. It's a tricky set of issues.
I would just add that, obviously, mandatory inclusionary zoning is has only been part of our zoning resolution for a few months now, and we are going to be getting, over the next period of time, several months, several years, I think, many applications that will present issues of first impression. And we are, as those start entering the pipeline, we're looking at those now, and I think we're going to see several that are going to be quite interesting for all of us to address and resolve. And I will only say that, again, within the law, our view is to apply it whenever we believe we can. And but when we feel it can't be applied for one reason or another, we operate as we do with the zoning resolution we have, not necessarily the one we'd like to see sometimes. So with that, we will get you more information for Wednesday and beyond. There'll be public hearing on Wednesday, but this will go way beyond that.
Will John's memo be available before?
I don't know. That depends on John.
Sure. I've been in touch with various, with the community board and with the Manhattan Borough President's Office about this as well. So there are materials already, as long as I can get it in front of Anita before then.
Okay.
I should say it depends on John and Anita.
Thank you, John.
Ms. Efron.
I actually don't have a John question, I have a Beverly question, if I may. Which is...
Beverly.
The response to the question about the minimum, street frontage. The response says that many of them exceed the height and then goes to list 3. Could you just remind us what the standard is for context of street wall? Because looking at the diagram that's up there on the wall, I am troubled by the idea of that many, since...
Not many, several.
Okay, but it really...
It's a fine distinction, Beverly, between many and several.
I just don't see it meeting the standard, so I'm just a little bit confused. So beyond the question about MIH, I just have some questions about this proposal in general, and I just hope the team comes ready to answer all of the conditions, which to me are not black and white, so to speak.
Yeah, they'll be prepared on Wednesday to respond to you.
Mr. Cantor.
Your calculations of area, did they take any
I'm not able to answer that, but I can find out. Have them speak to that on Wednesday.
Any other questions? Okay, public hearing Wednesday. I'm sure it'll be an interesting public hearing.
So now, let's advance to item number 8, page 210, proposed zoning map amendment, urban development action area project designation, project approval and disposition of city-owned property, as well as a zoning text amendment and special permits to facilitate mixed-use predominantly residential development and affordable housing in the Melrose section of the Bronx. On item number 8, page 210, our presenter is Sean Brady, Deputy Director of the Bronx Office.
Great. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Again, good afternoon, Chairman Weisbrot. This is a pre-hearing briefing for the application by the Department of Housing Preservation and Development for the proposed La Centrale project, a 992-unit mixed-use affordable housing project located in Community District 1 in the Bronx. The project, formerly known as Bronx-Chester Urban Renewal Area, Sites 6 and 7A, was certified here on April 11th, and a public hearing will be held this Wednesday. So I'm going to quickly go through and give a little refresher here. The proposed development, you can see, again, highlighted in yellow here. Today is M11, the majority of the site, which permits one FAR of commercial, community facility, and light manufacturing uses. The southern portion is today C44. Today, the site is currently vacant. Just a little bit about the surrounding area and the site itself, which is pretty important for this site. The proposed project, again, located in the Melrose neighborhood of Community District 1. The project is within the area that is known as the hub, considered the retail center of the South Bronx, only 1 block from the development site. You have the convergence of Westchester Avenue, 3rd Avenue, and Melrose Avenue, which is one of the key commercial intersections in the Bronx. 2 blocks north of the site, you have the 221-unit Via Verde development. There are a number of public institutions surrounding the area. You have University Heights High School, Mott Haven Village Prep, Crotona Academy High School, and which has an adjacent field of 166,000 square feet, the Merrill Lynch Field of Dreams. Additionally, the Hostos Lincoln Academy of Science is located on East 149th between St. Anne's and Eagle. St. Mary's Park, the largest park in the South Bronx at 35 acres, is located to the southeast of the site. The area is well served by mass transit. Again, just to give some context, you have the 2 and 5 elevated rail line that runs along Westchester Avenue in the southern portion of the site. There's 6 bus lines that intersect the area. There's a series of photos about the site. I think the takeaway, I'm not going to go through each, is that today the site is currently vacant. You can see the elevated rail line as it begins to go underground there behind the site. The site is really a missing connection between the key commercial corridors of Westchester 3rd and 149th Street, and activation of the site will be a key piece in bringing this area together. The applicant, HPD, again, is proposing a series of actions that will facilitate the creation of a large-scale general development. This will compose of 5 mixed-use buildings that will include 832 units of affordable housing and 162 units of supportive housing. That housing, again, HPD can talk a little bit more to the mix, but it is to be 50% under 60% AMI, 30% between 60 and 80% AMI, and 20% up to 100% AMI. The median household income in Bronx Community District 1 is $21,000. The site will also include 46,000 square feet of commercial floor area, 124,000 square feet of community facility space. This also includes a YMCA that's 50,000 square feet. Additionally, studio space for BronxNet
television will be included. There are 209 underground parking spaces, 426 bike spaces, and 90,000 square feet of open space. The buildings on the site will range between 9 and 13 stories, aside from Site E, which will rise up to 25 stories, and that site will also include the Sloan Digital Survey Sky Telescope, which will be remotely operated by the Bronx High School of Science. The actions that will facilitate this development that were certified again on April 11th is the disposition of city-owned property, the zoning map amendment to rezone portions of 3 tax blocks from N11 and C44 today to a C62 zoning, which has a R9 residential equivalent in this non-contextual development that will go up to 7.2 FAR. Additionally, the amendment to Appendix F to add the project to the list of MH housing areas. They will be mapping options 1 and 2 as part of this proposed development. And you can see here, additionally, they will need special permits to permit the distribution of required open space within the large scale. Additionally, a special permit to permit residential and non-residential uses to be arranged within the second floor of Building B without regard for location regulations. That is for the TV studio space. It will have its own separate entrance as well. And you can see here the zoning map amendment to C62 from the C44 and M11 today. Here is a, a site plan indicating the different buildings, buildings A through E. A little difficult to read, but you can see this is buildings A, B, and D will be completed in phase 1. This will be a phased development. Phase 1 will commence in 2017, and then it is proposed that phase 2 will begin a year later with the final completion of the development prior to 2020. Again, you can see just a little bit of the proposed site layout. Commercial uses are concentrated along Westchester Avenue. Uses in Building A will have the YMCA, this is Building A here, along with the proposed rooftop farm. C, D, E, and A will all have landscaped open space on the roof. C, D, and A will have seating that is available for the residents, and a private terrace will be on the 9th floor of Site B, available to the residents of that building. And quickly, you can see some images of the building. What's really important is how the street grid is able to kind of extend through the site. You can see again, here's where the elevated 2-5 line goes underground in the back of the site. This is where the proposed rooftop garden space is, backing up to the rail line. The proposed YMCA site is on the ground floor of Building A right here, the highest, the 25-story building with the telescope site, of course, located on the northern portion of the site. And so with that, I'll open it up to questions. I think this project came through relatively recently and should be familiar with everyone. But also, a community board hearing was held on 4/28. The vote was positive, 23 yes votes with 1 vote to abstain. There were conditions with that vote, and important to note, there were 3 conditions, the first being that Community Board 1 does receive the 50% community preference, that the rental management company hired by Hudson Companies and HPD will continue to provide a report on the status of this preference. Additionally, the second condition, the board shall receive ongoing reports on how local CB1 residents are hired and then permanently retained on the project during and after the construction period. And the third condition, that there is a continuous dialogue by the developer to the board, keeping them informed quarterly on each phase of the project. HPD and the developer are currently working closely with Community Board 1 to meet these conditions. The Borough President's Office held a hearing on May 17th. We do not have that recommendation yet, but we hope to receive that recommendation today, but certainly before the hearing on Wednesday.
Thank you very much, Sean. Questions for Sean? Ms. Delos?
You anticipated what's the AMI and the community piece, I appreciate that. Those are solar arrays, right, on the roof?
They are.
So is this project seeking LEED certification? They'll tell us on
I'll have to
Wednesday.
follow up with that. Yeah, they'll certainly be able to answer that question on Wednesday.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, public hearing Wednesday. Thanks, Sean.
Next items, item number 9, page 295, proposed zoning text amendment to permit indirectly illuminated signs along commercial infill sites within the Special Grand Concourse Preservation District and Community District 5, the Bronx. Now, our presenter is Hannah Peters, who's the lead project planner from the Bronx office. Item number 5, page 295, another Bronx pre-hearing item.
All right, so this was referred out on March 28th, so relatively recently, but just to refresh everybody's memory, the requested action is a proposed text amendment by 1775 Grand Concourse LLC to allow indirectly illuminated signs on the street frontage of commercial infill sites within the Special Grand Concourse Preservation District in Bronx Community District 5. So just a little bit of context, the area that we're talking about here is Community District 5 along the Grand Concourse between the Cross Bronx and Fordham to the north. It's zoned in R8 and then occasionally with the C14 and C44. It's very well served by mass transit. The B and D lines are within proximity as well as several bus lines. These affected sites, there are 11 of them, which include the applicant site, which is down here towards the south. Many of these sites already have indirectly illuminated signage on them, so the proposed amendment would allow the indirectly illuminated signs on these sites to continue operating. And there's really no specific sign proposed. The applicant themselves is 1775 Grand Concourse LLC right here. It's Bronx Block 2822, Lot 7501, and it's the southwest corner of Grand Concourse in East 175th Street. Here are a couple of photos of the site. The top tax block right here. This is street level. It shows several businesses in the ground floor here, one of which is Con Edison. You can see the sign. They have the signage, but obviously there's no illumination. And then these are just some site photos on the left here, like I was talking about, is 1775. There is some illumination, obviously, but there's no sign illumination. These middle photos are from within the special district. These are all examples of non-permitted illumination, essentially, backlit letters and awnings. And then on the right here are two examples of indirectly illuminated signage where the light kind of shines from an exterior source onto the sign. In terms of what it would do for the area, we think it would improve the streetscape along the Grand Concourse and kind of garner new foot traffic, boost visibility, increase safety for pedestrians, but without really kind of having the implications that directly illuminated signage would. So yeah, this was referred out on March 28th. The Community Board 5 in the Bronx unanimously approved it on May 25th, and the borough president has no plans to submit anything.
Thank you. Questions?
Great.
You have an uncontroversial
I just have a
public.
question.
Not so fast. Ms. Ortiz.
I find it interesting that these signs are not currently allowed. What is sort of the status citywide?
In terms of
The indirectly illuminated signs?
well, they're not currently permitted within that district along the special along the Grand Concourse, just because it's an R8, so it's more residential supposedly. But these were sites that were kind of mapped out when the special district was created. So
Okay, so it's unique to this special district that
Right.
these are not allowed, so this is more a correction in a way?
right, yeah. So we kind of think that it's a good middle ground between, the commercial properties being allowed to operate and having residential in the area as well.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions for Hannah? Thanks.
Let's now advance to item number 10, page 302. Empire State Development's proposed Fountain Avenue Land Use Improvement and Residential Project, General Project Plan to facilitate affordable housing in Community District 5, Brooklyn, Our presenter is Corbin Manning. We're on item number 10, page 302, Brooklyn non-ULURP.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commission. The Empire State Development Corporation is proposing the Fountain Avenue Land Use Improvement and Residential Project pursuant to a general project plan to facilitate a mixed-use development with 1,169 units of affordable housing, ground floor retail, and community facilities space on 2 parcels on a block containing the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, former Brooklyn Development Center in the Spring Creek section of Brooklyn's Community District 5. The Commission is reviewing the general project plan because it requires the override of local zoning for implementation. The area surrounding the block containing the Brooklyn Development Center consists of the HPD-sponsored Gateway Estates project, and is an approximately 2,200 unit, predominantly low to mid-rise affordable housing development, and the 1.2 million square foot Gateway Center shopping mall to the west. Gateway Estates development begun in 2010 pursuant to a rezoning and amendment of the Fresh Creek Urban Renewal Plan approved by the City Planning Commission on February 19th, 2009, and adopted by the City Council on April 2nd, 2009, is currently nearing completion. Spring Creek Park, a mapped natural park that is not publicly accessible, is located to the east of Fountain Avenue, while other publicly accessible parkland is located to the southwest of Gateway Drive and the south of the Gateway Center. Zoning in the surrounding area includes R6, a medium-density residential zoning district that allows an FAR of up to 2.43 under height factor and 3.0 under the quality housing regulations, R6 C24 on a portion of the block front on Fountain Avenue north of Vandalia Avenue, which allows local retail uses on the ground floors, and R7A C24 along Elton Street in the Gateway development, a medium-density residential zoning district that allows an FAR of up to 4.0 with local retail on the ground floor. The area of Gateway Center Mall is zoned C4-2, a medium-density commercial zoning district that allows commercial FAR of up to 3.4 and residential FAR equivalent to R6 districts. A small one-block area to the north is zoned M-1, a light manufacturing district that allows an FAR of up to 1.0 and is currently being developed for a FedEx shipment facility. The area is served by numerous bus lines, including the B13, B83, and B84, as well as the Q8 bus. The Brooklyn Development Center consists of an approximately 35-acre site in the Spring Creek neighborhood of in the East New York section of Brooklyn, bounded by Vandalia Avenue to the north, Fountain Avenue to the east, Seaview Avenue to the south, and Erskine Street to the west. The property is owned by the people of the state of New York, acting through the Dormitory Authority of the state of New York, and is operated by OPWDD. The property served as a residential center for people with developmental disabilities from 1974 through 2015. As part of the state's ongoing transition to supporting individuals with developmental disabilities in community-based settings, the residential portion of the Brooklyn Development Center closed on December 31st, 2015, and is currently used for OPWDD administrative offices. There is no current redevelopment plan for the remainder of the property other than what is proposed for the 2 development sites through this general project plan. A portion of the property, comprised of 2 non-contiguous, primarily undeveloped parcels totaling approximately 6.7 acres, have been deemed as surplus property and comprise the development site. Parcel A, Lot 500, is located on the northern edge of the property along Vandalia Avenue and is approximately 4.7 acres. I'm sorry, that's parcel B. Parcel A, Lot 500, is located at the southwest corner of the property across from Gateway Center Mall and is approximately 2 acres. Both parcels are minimally developed with parking lots, driveways, and lawn areas. The project area is located in an R3-2 zoning district, which allows residential floor area of up to 0.5 and has a maximum building height of 35 feet, maximum lot coverage of 35%, a required front yard of at least 15 feet, and a minimum of 1 parking space per dwelling unit. The proposed development would create 1,169 units of affordable housing, and approximately 122,500 square feet of commercial space. The general project plan would require that 100% of the units developed as part of the proposed action would be targeted to affordability levels at or below 60% of AMI. The general project plan would also require that approximately 200 units would be set aside specifically for low-income senior citizens. In addition, up to 20% of the non-senior units would be designated for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The proposed action would introduce 3 series or groups of buildings on parcel A and B, each affecting a ring of buildings. Each group of buildings would comprise adjacent but discrete buildings with separate entrances. The buildings introduced with the proposed actions would be constructed in accordance with the Enterprise Green Community standards and are anticipated to achieve Enterprise Green Community certification. Parcel A would be developed as a pair of attached buildings containing a total of approximately 332 residential units, approximately 44,756 square feet of commercial area, and approximately 221 parking spaces. The building group on Parcel A would be comprised of 2 buildings with varied masses, with heights from 6 to 9 stories, approximately 65 to 95 feet in height, with no setback. The building group would be situated at the western and southern lot lines at the sidewalks of Erskine Street and Seaview Avenue, respectively. As currently envisioned, Parcel A would include a mix of apartment types, including studio, 1, 2, and 3-bedroom apartments. Commercial, retail, and/or office space would be developed at the ground floor of Parcel A buildings along Erskine Street. 118 parking spaces would be provided in a below-grade garage that would extend throughout the central area of the building group, and approximately 2,200 square feet of private open space would be developed atop it, accessible to Parcel A residents from the second floor of each building. Outdoor surface parking would also be provided at the northeastern corner of Parcel A. Parcel B would be developed as 2 separate building groups, altogether containing a total of approximately 837 residential units, approximately 60,704 square feet of commercial area, and approximately 254 parking spaces. The 2 building groups on Parcel B would comprise buildings with varied masses and heights of 5 to 9 stories, from 50 to 95 feet in height, with no setbacks. Both Parcel B building groups would be situated at the Vandalia Avenue lot line and to the respective lot lines to the west and east at the sidewalk of Erskine Street and Seaview Avenue, respectively. These apartments would include a mix of studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom apartments. As well, the western building group would include approximately 200 units set aside for seniors. Commercial, retail, and/or office space would be developed at the ground floor level of all Parcel B buildings, except for the 2 easternmost buildings of the eastern building group. Ground floor covered parking would be developed centrally within each building group in Parcel B, about 127 spaces for each building, or 254 spaces total. On top of this parking would be 7,700 square feet of private open space accessible to residents from the second floor of each building. As well, a new publicly accessible landscaped thoroughfare would be constructed along the southern border of Parcel B, known as Schroeder's Walk, and depicted here in this rendering. This would provide a connection east to west from Erskine Street to Fountain Avenue, as well as between the 2 building groups, connecting to Vandalia Avenue to the north. Schroeder's Walk would be separated from Lot 300, which is the Brooklyn Development Center campus, by a decorative privacy fence installed along the perimeter of the lot line. In order to facilitate this development, ESD proposes to override the existing zoning with respect to the following aspects of the project: the proposed commercial and community facility space, allowing use groups 1 through 10 on this site, use of the quality housing program, up to 4.06 FAR, a dwelling unit factor of 680, up to 100% lot coverage with no yards, up to 95-foot street wall height with no setback, parking for 35% of the dwelling units, public sidewalks to be developed with street trees and 10-foot pits at intervals of 25 feet with no planting strip, as well as permitted illuminated non-flashing signage. The proposed building conforms to a roughly R7A density with heights of 5 to 9 stories. The density in bulk is similar to that found along the Elton Street corridor in the nearby Gateway Elton development. Vandalia, Erskine, Seaview, and Fountain Avenues are all wide streets where such building heights are appropriate. ESD consulted with the Department of City Planning to develop aspects of this site plan and design controls. And upon further review of the general project plan, DCP has additional comments on this GPP, which are documented in a draft letter that you received. First, with respect to ground floor uses, while the department is pleased to see non-residential ground floor uses proposed on Vandalia Avenue, Seaview Avenue, and Erskine Street to provide needed services to area residents, additional measures will ensure that these corridors are active and inviting for pedestrians. A minimum of 50% of the area between 2 and 12 feet above curb level should be transparent, with no blank walls to exceed more than 10 feet in width, and all ground floor parking should be fully wrapped by other uses and not visible from public sidewalks. Additionally, along Seaview Avenue, Vandalia Avenue, and Erskine Street, minimum sidewalk width of 15 feet with a 10-foot wide clear path and 5-foot wide street tree planting and amenity strip should be provided. And the city's standard street tree planting requirements should be adhered to along all street frontages. Additionally, ESD and the project developer should coordinate with Gateway Center and DOT regarding a triangle of space at Seaview Avenue and Erskine Street south of Parcel A, where a bus stop serving 3 lines is located. This will provide the primary transit access for area residents, and thus it's important that there is ample pedestrian access and appropriate landscaping at this key node on the site plan. As well, buildings should be designed to provide variety and visual interest, to break up large masses and frontages, and to differentiate the buildings along the street frontages. This could be accomplished by providing for visual breaks through variation in massings and changes in plane materials and glazing and fenestration. The building should also have clear divisions in the facade design with attention to definition and differentiation and treatment at the lower 1 to 2 floors where the commercial uses are found, the lower base of the building that most impacts the pedestrian experience, as well as providing variation and articulation in the upper floors of the building through cornice lines or articulated parapet details, massing variation, or dormers that contribute to the overall streetscape profile of the new development. As well, we appreciate that the site plan is well integrated with the surrounding street network, particularly through the continuation of Schroeder's Avenue as Schroeder's Walk through the project site as a publicly accessible open space. Additionally, we encourage ESD and the developer to include seating, planting, lighting, and other amenities as part of this walk to ensure that it is an inviting and active open space for residents as well as community users. Finally, while there is not yet a redevelopment plan for the remainder of the site of the former Brooklyn Development Center, beyond the 2 parcels currently proposed for redevelopment, we believe that this property represents a significant opportunity for redevelopment in the future. And at such a time that the state does consider redevelopment of the remainder of the property, we would encourage ESD to develop a holistic proposal for the site in which the heights and densities in this proposed project before you today should not be considered a template for future development. We would encourage ESD to develop a comprehensive plan for the site that includes a mix of densities as well as uses, including housing as well as commercial and job-generating uses, and community facilities, as well as thoughtfully designed open space. Similar to the city's comprehensive development at Gateway, which included a mix of densities as well as uses. And we think that in the future, this site would have the potential to help complete this new neighborhood forming in this portion of Brooklyn by providing other uses. As I mentioned, there's a draft comment letter that has been prepared, which we're happy to take comments on, and I think will be discussed further on Wednesday.
Thank you, Corin. Just before entertaining questions, my understanding is that the comment period on the DEIS at ESD is closing
Thursday, so Wednesday would
Thursday,
be
so,
the time to submit. the
um,
comment.
we realize this is really the first and only time we've had a presentation on this, and it's a big project. And so we do want to get your comments, incorporate them into a final letter that we could get your approval on Wednesday, and then send to ESD before their comment period closes. So with that in mind, Ms. Deluz.
I have a series of questions, some of them which might actually be relevant to put in the comment letter. And I'll just lay them out. So I guess, what exactly is our role? Perhaps it's just to comment and submit the letter. That's one question. I have a question of whether or not any city funding is going to be utilized for the affordable housing.
Yes, there's some
Okay.
city financing for,
Okay, well
on
then
parcel A.
in that case in particular, then, it seems that the parking requirements that we have in place should be applied, because it seems like they're exceeding that. I understand this is not a transit-rich zone. But given that it's 100% affordable and given the AMI levels, the likelihood of needing that many parking spaces seems unlikely. And that would open up the space for other uses, whether it's open space or perhaps additional units to be considered.
You mean adhering to fewer parking requirements? Okay, on this side? Okay. Yeah, this actually isn't in the transit
No,
zone.
I understand
Okay,
it's
sorry.
not. I understand it's not, but it's a 100% affordable project at pretty deep levels of affordability. So I'm assuming that they are exceeding the existing city requirements for parking. And if they are, then I would say they, especially since they're using city funding, that they should abide by the parking ratios.
Well, to be clear, it's, they're not abiding by the parking requirements of the existing zoning district, but of the proposed R7A district, or the equivalent district that they are adhering to.
Okay.
But, yes, comment
Okay.
noted.
And again, I guess since they're using city funding for partial portion of the project, I'm wondering if we shouldn't think about requiring MIH, especially since this is such a significant number of affordable units, and if that's something that's within our purview in this case.
Well, just to be clear, we have discussed this, and it's because this is not coming before us as a zoning matter and is only advisory. We can't impose MIH legally. We
And they
will
voluntarily-
explore that with HPD to see what can be imposed through their regulatory agreement, or alternatively through whatever ESD would do, given the number of units here and the.
And the other question I had was really just what has been the public process so far in order for them to get to this point? And if there are any comments from the public that would be relevant for us to reference in our comments, I think that would be very important.
There was a scoping session on the DEIS that was held in March, I believe. And there were, I think, 30 to 40 people testified at that. Yeah, that was a public hearing on the EIS, sorry.
And I would just,
Not just scoping, yeah, good point.
and it would be helpful if we could maybe see that and think about how we might incorporate some of those comments in our comment. I would appreciate that. And the only other question I had was really about the amount of square footage on the commercial. I'm just wondering, especially given how proximate it is to the mall, and I understand it's a different type of commercial, and I'm not as expert as some other people here on commercial, but it's still a lot, and I'm just wondering if there's a demand for that much.
Ms. Efron.
Just building on that, 100,000 square feet in the context of the conversations we had during the zoning hearings about East New York seems like a significant amount. I'm just wondering why, given the nature of some of the residents in there, both those with disabilities and seniors, there was one reference to senior housing, why community facility hasn't been specified here. But if it is commercial space and some of it is retail, is there an easy crossing between the gateway, it looks like the parking lot, and the ground floor retail, or is that something the city needs to actively engage?
Good question. I know there's at least some consideration to community facilities. In the EIS, they identified a potential childcare impact, and one of the possible mitigation strategies was a restrictive declaration requiring a childcare facility on site. And I know that's something they're considering, but
Well,
great point about community facilities as well as commercial
especially
uses.
senior center, I don't know how close the nearest one is and what the public transportation is.
Mr. Knuckles?
I don't recall reading it in here, but I guess one can assume from the size of this project that it's a multi-year endeavor. Do you know approximately how long it's going to take to complete the project?
So, yes, parcel A will be the first to be developed according to the general project plan. That will be developed within 30 months. The goal is within 30 months of the project closing. Parcel B, which is the northern parcel, will be developed, I believe, by 2028. So, longer time horizon for parcel B.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Ms. Levin?
Corin, were you reading from a draft that was a little more mature than the one that went on the FTP site?
Right.
Because it had some additional good-sounding things on it.
Elaborated on.
Would it be possible to make that available to us
We'll be
before
sharing.
Wednesday so we can be working off of that draft?
Yeah, we'll share a revised.
And then, could I ask, looks like there's a large, open, empty parcel just across Vandalia Avenue. Is that the FedEx?
That's I believe, the M district that you're speaking about, here?
Yes.
Yes, that will be a
There,
FedEx
on that
distribution
big empty
center.
thing.
It was purchased by FedEx about 3 years ago.
So has appropriate thought been given to the streetscape facing that? Perhaps you're appropriately calling for transparency and so on, but
Oh, thank you, good point. Thank you, Winston. So this, actually, I'm not sure if you can see this sort of lot line here.
yes.
So this would actually be housing, that would be sort of a buffer between the parcel B
Oh, so
and the FedEx
The
center.
lighter thing is the FedEx and,
The M
and
district.
so the housing, would that be developed pursuant to zoning?
That is part of the Gateway Estates development, and that will be Nehemiah Housing.
Okay, so they'll have to play by city rules.
Yes, I believe that's been proposed according to, per the existing zoning.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Boy,
And the urban renewal plan that controls development on that site.
if we wanted an illustration of packing the bulk, here you go. I mean, this is really pretty, goodness. Thank you.
Ms. Ortiz?
Hi, I just wanted to second Commissioner Efron's comments about, the desire to look at the connections, the pedestrian connections between this and the retail across the street to ensure that they're functioning, in synergy with one another, because that's what you'll need to make this retail work.
We'll emphasize that.
Any other comments? Thank you all for those very helpful comments and extremely helpful. And we'll try to get you a draft, Corin, tomorrow. So you'll have some, I'm sorry about the time pressures, but we'll try to get you a draft tomorrow for Wednesday. Thanks.
So Commissioners, next we have 2 proposed council modifications. The first is with respect to 1 Flushing, which involved a series of land use actions to facilitate a mixed-use development in Queens Community District 7. And Hae Kyung will walk us through the council's modifications.
On June 15, 2016, the Land Use Committee of the City Council recommended modification of the City Planning Commission's decision to approve the disposition of city-owned property as part of ULIP application C 160143 HAQ. The The application and its related actions are to facilitate the development of a mixed-use affordable housing project in downtown Flushing, Queens. To recap, the 10-story mixed-use building will contain approximately 231 affordable dwelling units for seniors and families, with approximately 14,000 square feet of community facility space, 12,000 square feet of open space, and approximately 26,000 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor. The project will also provide a total of 229 parking spaces in the cellar of the building. On May 11, 2016, the CPC voted approval of the UDAP application and its related applications. On June 15th, the City Council Land Use Committee voted approval of the project modifications. The disposition modification requires that a minimum of 5,000 square feet of the development be reserved for use as community center or settlement house, non-commercial recreational center, library and museum, or a non-commercial art gallery, or a school. The restriction would last 5 years from the date of the first certificate of occupancy issued for the building. The City Council modifications do not raise any ULURP or seeker scope issues, as the project remains unchanged and no significant adverse impacts result from the proposed modifications.
Any questions? Okay. Entertain your assent to the City Council's modifications that are, as far as we can tell, totally within scope. So, all in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Our next council modification involves the Water Street Upgrades Text Amendment concerning the infilling of existing arcades along portions of Water Street in Lower Manhattan. And our presenter is Richard Swartz.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The City Council is proposing modifications to the Water Street Upgrade Zoning Text Amendment, which was approved with modifications by the City Planning Commission on April 25th. Section 197D of the New York City Charter provides that prior to approving a decision of the Commission with modifications, the Council shall file the modified text with the Commission, who shall have 15 days to determine whether the proposed modifications are of such significance that additional review of environmental or land use issues is required. Quickly just reviewing, this is a proposed zoning text amendment to the Special Lower Manhattan District that would allow the infill of existing arcades and the upgrade of existing plazas by chairperson certification or commission authorization. It would also allow events within the plazas and the arcades as of right, and would continue to allow cafes within arcades by chairperson certification. The text amendment would apply to the area between Fulton and Whitehall Streets, South and Pearl and South William Streets in Lower Manhattan, which is centered around Water Street. And within this area, there are 19 buildings, 17 of which have arcades, totaling about approximately 110,000 square feet of arcades, and approximately 225,000 square feet of plazas. Just to give a recap of where we are, so on April 25th, the Commission approved the text amendment with modifications. The Council's clock began on April 27th. The clock would have ended on the 16th, but on the 15th, we received a modification letter. We intend to transmit a scope determination today so that the Council may, at the stated meeting tomorrow, vote to approve the text amendment with modifications. The proposed modifications still maintain much of the original framework of the zoning text, but further refines what is permitted and expands the public review of future applications for arcade infill and plaza improvements. I'll have some visuals to go through a few of these, but I'll just go through the list. In addition to a certification pursuant to Section 9183 or an authorization pursuant to Section 91841, infill of 7,500 square feet or greater will require a CPC special permit pursuant to a new Section 9185. The total area of prior certifications and prior authorizations will be included in that area that would trigger the special permit, except that the area of any indoor public space that is provided in accordance with the provisions for indoor public spaces in the proposed text would be excluded from this calculation. The Commission would find that the improvements on the zoning lot, which would include the infill and the plaza upgrades, are of equal or greater public benefit to the arcade being eliminated. Second modification, infill at 200 Water Street and 75 Wall Street, which were previously permitted by certification pursuant to 9183 or in Area A of the text, is now permitted by authorization pursuant to Section 91841, which would be Area B in the text. This change is reflected in a modification to Map 9 of Appendix A. Additional uses are excluded from the uses that are permitted within infill, and frontage restrictions are set for banks and drugstores at 30 and 50 feet respectively. I should note that banks were not permitted on plazas, so where there is a non-plaza frontage, banks would be limited to 30 feet. There are a number of use group restrictions that are added to the text. The commission did exclude use group 5A, which was hotel rooms. I should just note that many of the uses are uses that we never really anticipated would go within these arcades, except that 10A, department stores or clothing stores over 10,000 square feet, would not be permitted to locate within an arcade. But bike rental, repair, and art studios would be permitted within the arcade spaces. For buildings with multiple frontages, with multiple arcade frontages, if any portion of the arcade remains open and the other portions are filled in, requirements for lighting, transparency, and the treatment of building walls would apply, and I will have a visual showing that. Notification must be given to the community board, the borough president, and the council member of any event at least 30 days prior to the scheduled date of that event. Applications for chairperson certifications pursuant in section 9183 for infill must also be referred by the applicant to the council member. And I should note that the commission did modify the zoning text to require a 45-day community board review. That council member review would go with that 45-day community board review. Periodic compliance reports for plazas are required to be sent to the council member for plazas and, in this case, here on Water Street for indoor public spaces. There's an addition of a finding to the authorization to modify design requirements for section 91842, which is really a clarification that any waiver of required amenities for circulation paths is the minimum extent necessary. And there are also minor clarifying edits to the language throughout the text. So in terms of, there are two buildings that are moved over from the certification to the authorization. So this map, which we've seen a lot, shows the areas in red are subject to chairperson infill by chairperson certification. Areas in blue, so we have a portion here, a portion here, and there's a little portion here, will be permitted by commission authorization. This is 200 Water Street here, and this is 75 Wall Street. And a quick change. Oop. They move from certification to authorization. And in terms of the change in the zoning text, map 9, which showed where those areas, where areas A and B are located, would be tweaked so that 200 Water Street would also become Area B, 75 Wall Street would also become Area B. In terms of the special permit, there are 7 buildings that could be affected by the requirement for the special permit. So again, this is infill that is equal or greater to 7,500 square feet. All of these arcades here, we have 1 York Plaza, 85 Broad Street, 7 Hanover Square, 55 Water Street, 32 Old Slip, 77 Water Street, and 75 Wall Street. The arcade areas are generally around 12,000 square feet, with the exception that 75 Wall Street, it's about 5,000 square feet, but they have 2 levels. So if they enlarge both the first and second floor, they would go over the 7,500 square feet requirement. And I should note that the text is written to be rather flexible. So if you have multiple frontages, say at 85 Broad Street, the text is not required to fill in all sides. You can fill in 1, 2, any combination, provided that you meet the basic requirements for a full length and depth of a street wall. Furthermore, if you have a second floor, so 7 Hanover Square, and 77 Water Street, and 75 Wall Street, you are permitted to enlarge, but you are not required to enlarge. So I think we'll see a lot of iterations of applicants coming forward trying to implement this text in a way that will involve a range of both indoor public spaces and retail and community facility uses. In terms of when you have remaining portions of an arcade that are open, so if you have 2 frontages of an arcade, and if you propose to fill in just one side, again, you fill for the full length and the depth of the arcade, and this portion will remain open. There would be a 5-foot candle requirement for this open portion of the arcade, which is consistent for arcades that are provided to satisfy requirements for pedestrian circulation space in Lower Manhattan and Midtown. Furthermore, if this, the use located within the infill is located on a portion of the ground floor and has frontage on this open arcade, then the transparency requirements for the infill will also apply to this building wall, which is 70% between the building columns for a height between 2 and 14 feet. Any remaining portion that does not have a use that is within the infill fronting on the arcade will be required to be treated with the decorative material, artwork, or planting. So that's it for the modifications. Staff has reviewed the proposed modifications and recommends that the commission transmit a letter to the city council indicating that the proposed modifications raise no land use or environmental issues requiring further review. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Richard. Questions for Richard?
Just one thing.
Mr. Knuckles?
The authorization
Yes.
is the CPC authorization?
That's correct, yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, and just, is that, are those reviewable by the council?
The modified text does not technically include the council receiving those, but it could be the practice of the department to refer them, and I think the council would be very keen on seeing those applications.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Richard? Ms. Levin?
Yeah, Richard, I'm not sure I understand the language about the new special permit.
Sure.
Infill of 7,500 square feet or greater will require a special permit. This is the part I don't understand. The total area of prior certifications pursuant to 9183 or 91837 and prior authorizations, are included in the area that would trigger the special permit.
Correct.
So can you use an example of
Sure.
how that might work?
32 Old Slip here.
Yeah?
It's 12,000 square feet. Let's assume each side is 4,000 square feet. If they came in to just fill in the Gouverneur Lane side, that would be a certification because it's below 7,500 square feet. They would upgrade the plaza. Now, if they came in later and wanted to fill in, say, the Old Slip side, the two together would equal 8,000 square feet, which would require the special permit.
And would the special permit then have to be a do-over of the part that got certified?
No, they would not have to recertify. They would still get a
It's just
certification
that the
for
permit would be
this.
triggered for the new bit.
Right, so they would get a certification for this, and then the special permit will just look at the
Okay,
zoning
all
law.
right, thank you.
Richard, just the meaning of the word event in this instance is a performing event on the plazas?
Formal event. We do not anticipate informal gatherings to qualify as an event. So if you and your friends had a small potluck, I think that's in the
So,
spirit and intended use of clauses.
what's meant by event here is a public event.
Yes,
that-
the text is clear that they must be public.
Any other questions for Richard? This is a long process, for sure. I will ask for your assent to send a letter to the city council saying that these modifications do not raise any land use or environmental issues. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
So Commissioners, let's now move to the future votes post-hearing follow-up discussion. Staff have prepared favorable resolutions for the following. 2700 Stillwell Avenue, which involves a special permit to facilitate commercial use in Community District 13, Brooklyn. We also have a Broadway Sherman Avenue rezoning, which is a proposed zoning map and zoning text amendment as revised by the applicant during the public review process to facilitate a mixed-use development in the Inwood neighborhood of Manhattan. We have 20 Buttonwood Road, which is a proposed authorization to facilitate enlargement to a single-family home in the Special Natural Area District of Staten Island. And then we have Cleveland Avenue and Hartford Street, proposed subdivision of property in the Special South Richmond Development District to facilitate residential development. Going forward to July 13th, we have the East Houston Street rezoning to facilitate commercial use in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. You received a letter from the applicant as a follow-up to the public hearing, and Joel is here to answer any questions you might have in that regard.
Any questions to Joel? No questions, Joel.
All right.
Get off the stage
Sounds
as
good.
quickly as you can.
And then we have 70 Vestry Street, which is a special use permit to facilitate accessory parking spaces in Tribeca, Manhattan. Just as a follow-up, on July 25th, staff will be presenting the Manhattan Core parking regulations as a presentation to you. And the last item is the 227th Street rezoning, which is a zoning map amendment to facilitate a public parking garage. We have Stephen Everett here from the Queen's office, who's our project manager. He will be addressing any questions, concerns you might have with respect to the correspondence you've received from the
Any
applicant?
questions to Stephen? Hearing none. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Madam Secretary, are there any other matters to come before us today?
No, not at all.
I will entertain a motion to
So moved.
adjourn. See you all on Wednesday.